everybody, to episode number 26 of Amazing Authors. You are ready. This is an empty room, and a story is always waiting to happen. And Kelly Hitchcock is our author today. And she is the fun and amazing author of Community Klepto, although I'm curious as to how other people think about the whole content, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a synopsis if you haven't read it yet to whet your appetites. And here we go. This is our room. We get to create magic and inspiration. And like I said, this is where the storyteller becomes the story. And today's story is all about Kelly Hitchcock. It's a good thing that I brought you into this place today, because I think that, you and I said we were aligned and it was going to happen. And somehow I have the list of who I want to get on the show. And definitely we must have been like thinking about each other at the same time. Because like, you got to come on. And you're like, yes. So here we are. Let me give everybody a little intro into who you are. You're a literary fiction author, humorist, and poet in Austin, Texas. You've published several poems, short stories, and creative nonfiction works in literary journals. And you're the author of the coming-of-age novel, The Redheaded Stepchild, and the short story collection, Portrait of Women in Ink, a Tattoo Storybook. Your newest novel is what we're going to be talking about today, Community Klepto, but she is definitely not new to that whole world of authorship for sure. And like I said, her newest novel is Community Klepto. Here we go. A very interesting cover. She's going to hopefully give us a little insight into that. And as I said, she is she writes press author. She just came out in June of 2022, so it's almost a year that you've been on the scene. So I love that we've had some time in between. So now you can tell us about the journey after the whole pub date and all that fun stuff that comes with that. As we all know, it doesn't end. It's just the beginning. So that's for sure. She also was a finalist in the Montaigne, gosh, I'm going to kill this word, but the Montaigne Medal for the Eric Hoffer Awards, which is amazing. And she's world renowned among a growing readership of several books. She's an editorial contributor to Austin Moms and Zibby Mag. She was raised by a single father in the small town of Buffalo, Missouri. She's got fond memories of life being broke as shit in the Ozarks, which is a little taste into her sense of humor. She definitely has one that strongly influenced her way of writing and her way of life. She's a graduate of Mizzou, Missouri State University, where she earned a Bachelor of Arts in Creative Writing. She has 7-year-old identical twins and a full-time job, so writing and picking up Legos are the only other things she can devote herself to, which is bravo to that. So good afternoon. It's still morning in your neck of the woods, but welcome.
Barely.
I'm happy.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
You definitely have a sense of style, so I'm glad you remembered for the tiara. I should have too, but I never miss an opportunity to grab one of those things for sure. But I'm really happy and I'm honored to have you join today so we can talk about you, your journey, and your book, Community Klepto. One of the things that I like to point out is this is not your first rodeo into publishing. So I'm curious as to how it's going so far with number 3.
Well, yes, you're right. It's not my first. My first book I published in my 20s, and I self-published it after shopping it over and over and being told basically over and over that nobody wants to hear a story about a white girl from the Midwest. So I was like, well, that's fine. I'm going to put it out anyway. And then I published another book in my 30s with a small press out of Indiana. They're not around anymore because COVID killed a lot of them off. And that was, its own journey too. And then, this third book that I have with the hybrid press, She Writes Press, definitely the one that has been most widely distributed, been in front of a lot more faces than my first two. And it's definitely been a journey with that book. I got an agent, and the agent immediately dropped me when they were like, oh, well, and kind of the same thing that I heard about my first was people in the Midwest don't want to read about that, and people in I even had the agent tell me at one point that people in the Midwest don't read, which is blatantly false. Like, people in the Midwest read. Like,
Yeah.
we're not all, illiterate, and there's a lot of, like, there are not a lot of books set in the Midwest. There are definitely not a lot of books set in Kansas City, but they are out there, and there are people in those flyover states that exist between the coasts, and we read.
Netflix like blockbuster for quite some time, even that show, and that came from somebody's storytelling for sure. I always say when agents say that, it's because they're lazy and they have lack of vision. And I said it out loud. They honestly don't understand you, so they can't believe in you. And
right.
they're looking for their own, hit it out of the ballpark too. So
I think with my book, a lot of the publishers and agents that I talked to didn't really know what box it fit into.
Yeah.
And they want you to be unique, but they don't want you to be so unique that they can't classify you. And not that my book is not classifiable, it definitely is, but I felt like they didn't really know where to put it. And so they were just like, nope, not even going to bother. And then I was working with a small press here in Austin who was going to publish it. We talked in, it was January of 2020, and you can guess how that went 2 months later. So again, I was back to square one after, spending so much time to write this book, to edit this book, to put it out there, to query agents, to query publishers, and basically get picked up and dropped twice.
Yeah.
So
talk about perseverance. I have to commend you for that. I think resiliency goes a long way when it comes to,
Well, you have to be.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And I always said, no one's going to believe in your work more than you. And it's your job to go out there and shake everyone up so they're like, wow, who's that? And why do I have an interest in that? And one of the things I want to make sure I don't forget to do is read the synopsis of your novel, because I think that is kind of like the little, teaser out there for anyone who hasn't picked up Community Klepto yet. So here it goes, and I'd love for you to expand on the outside. Anne Josephson is a 25-year-old sociopath. Boom, right there. Let's start with that, right? Whose compulsive kleptomania manifests itself in the most unlikely of places, the community center where she works out every day. Okay, if you don't get Kelly's humor, you're starting to see what I'm talking about here. The walls of the community center insulate her from the terrors of the outside world, which include her freelance work as a graphic artist, her socialite parents who pay the better part of her living expenses, her therapist who devotedly punches the clock, and the dark void of romantic relationships. As Anne battles the inner demons that plague her millennial psyche, she must also battle the fiends that plague her at the gym. The loudly grunting beefcake who can't be bothered to drop his weights at a reasonable volume, the naked old lady in the locker room using a towel as a butt floss, the housewife in yoga pants that obviate the need for yoga wheeling her double stroller up and down the indoor track. Set in suburban Kansas City in the early 2010s, Community Klepto, a droll combination of Bridget Jones' Diary and Choke, makes incarnate the characters and shenanigans that go on in every gym in the world. Okay, would you care to expand on that?
Yeah, so I got the idea to write this book. I was living in Kansas City. I was training for my first and last marathon. So I was spending a lot of time in the gym. I was dealing with a lot. It started as a short story based on an interaction I had on a treadmill next to a gentleman who I was watching C-SPAN on the gym TV, which is what I do in order to to signal, I really don't want you to talk to me. Like, I just want to do the workout and get out of here. So I'll put C-SPAN on the TV and listen to a book on my headphones. But this guy thought it was like an invitation to come talk to me, which it absolutely was not. But he struck up a conversation with me, and I'm like so uncomfortable. And I'm like, there are so many things that I would say to you if I were not a functioning grown-up, who's not a sociopath. But if I were, then this is what I would say. And I put that into a short story. And then I was like, I think there's a lot more here, because as I was spending more and more time in the gym, I was seeing people leave their stuff laying around everywhere. And not just like jackets and keys, but like iPads and laptops and all that. And I'm like I grew up in a very, very poor town, so like people take your stuff. And in this suburb in Johnson County, like nobody was taking their stuff, and I was like, anybody could just walk up and take it. And that's how the idea of Anne came to be. And of course, I'm also observing all these other people in the gym that I can't, talk about, like the old ladies in the locker room who are very comfortable with their own nudity. Like those exist everywhere. I can't just walk up and tell them, hey, you want to cover it up a bit or something? But I can if I'm a character and I'm in my own head. So that's how the book came to be.
Oh, wow. I love it because, it's in a way, it's taking reality and spinning it, the craziness of it, spinning it into some kind of humorist ingenue, I don't know, with regard to what you write. And I think that that's one of the most fascinating things about being an author. And certainly, when you get out of your own way and forget about writing for the masses and just write the story that's coming through you, then the party that takes on a whole other understanding becomes what you just said. And it's interesting, were people surprised based upon your other books that this one was about a kleptomaniac in a gym? I mean, was that something that they're like, what is she doing? Or they were like, oh yeah, this is total Kelly?
I'm not really sure. Like nobody's ever said said that they were surprised by it. I've had, like, in my critique group, a lot of people were surprised by the vulgarness of it.
Oh, really?
Just because, like, I swear from time to time, my kids have heard it all. But I don't talk like Anne does, like in my real life. In my head, absolutely, 100%. I talk like that. But so they were kind of surprised to hear those words. But I'm like, but it's not me. It's a character.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's great. And I think, so after number 1, number 2, and then how long did it take you to write number 3? How long did it take you to write Community Klepto?
It took about 10 years. Like I said, I started writing it in 2012. I finished the first draft when I was 7 months pregnant with twins. So from the time that first draft ended to the time that it was ready to send out, took a long time because I didn't have a lot of time to myself.
Yeah.
I was editing during nap time after the kids went to bed, but usually then I wanted to go to bed because I was exhausted. And then, I started putting it out when I think the twins were about 2. See, when you have kids, you just you forget years. You just measure timelines and how old your kids were. Like, oh, I think they were potty training at the time, so that would have been about 3. That would have been 2019.
Wow.
So I started sending it, around to publishers. I was still refining, still editing everything with the agent, and then the small press in 2020 happened, and then I did another round of edits because you're never done editing. I still find things that I'm like, no, I want to change this in this novel, and it's on the shelf at the bookstore. Like, you will never be fully, okay with what's out there, but you have to be okay with what's out there. And then I found She Writes Press, and I had another offer from another hybrid publisher at the time, but ended up going with She Writes Press, and I'm glad I did.
So it was 10 years total from beginning to the end. So
12.
More
yeah,
12.
I guess. Yeah, 10. 10. You're right. Yeah.
So you published in June 2022, and we're looking at June 2023 coming around. So tell me about your journey so far as an author this time around, and how was it the same or maybe different? And perhaps maybe were some expectations met, some not, so people get an idea as to the party that happens after, it's out in the world, your baby's out, your other child's out in the world.
Yes.
Doing it.
Oh, I mean, it takes on a life of its own. You don't really know who's going to pick it up. I'm grateful and thankful that my book is in a lot of libraries around the U.S., so I'm getting a lot of people saying on Goodreads that they found my book at their library, and that just warms my heart a little bit every single time I hear it, because yes, support your library, suggest titles to your library, get a card from your library, take your kids to the library. It's one of the last few free places that we have, and librarians are amazing. So, you know, that's a whole thing. I think, you know, just like with my first 2 books, I wasn't on things like this where I got to wear a tiara and go on podcasts. I didn't have a publicist. You know, I was going into bookstores and having to, you know, talk to people and basically beg them to put my book on the shelves. And now, you know, it's easier. I can just walk in and be like, oh yeah, my book is distributed through this dude, so please order it. And they're like, cool, yeah, we'll put some books on the shelf. And let's see what else.
Did you have a big book launch for this particular one? Did you have a big online event, or did you have in-person event?
I had a couple of in-person events here in Austin. I also went back home and did a little tour. My 20-year high school reunion was at the same time, so I like told myself I was not going to go, but then it's like, well, my book's coming out 2 weeks before that, so maybe I should go. So I did an event in my hometown of 2,400 people. I did an event in Kansas City, Kansas, right down the street from where the book takes place, and I did an event in my college town, which is Springfield. So
I have a question with regard to your audience now. Like, looking back now, almost a year out, what has been one of your favorite moments in maybe meeting a reader that's been following you and loves you and wants to hear more from you, or perhaps, you know, something that was surprising to you?
I've met so many people here in Austin. Like, we have a lot of good authors here. We have May Cobb, we have James Webb, we have Amy Gentry, Scott Montgomery. There's just so many. So, you know, I've gotten to meet so many great people. I got to be part of the Texas Book Festival. I'm part of the Writers League of Texas and have gotten to do some events through them, which is fantastic. But what has surprised me the most, and one of my favorite moments about my launch, is the people who have reached out to say, I love that you set this book where you did, because I see, you know, the places and people and things, you know, like I had people, like with my first book, I fictionalized it and set it in Minnesota, but people said, this sounds a lot like the Ozarks. And I'm like, well, probably because I am from the Ozarks. So, you know, people, they like to see representation of themselves in art, in books, in film, and not all of those representations historically have been positive. Like Ozark and Winter's Bone.
Yeah.
And when Winter's Bone came out, there was an LA Times review of it that was basically the most condescending thing I've ever read about. Like, they basically assume that everybody who lives in the Ozarks eats squirrel. And like that Kansas looks like, you know, and I've had people who are not from the Midwest who've read my book be like, oh, this isn't what I expected Kansas to be. And I'm like, well, it's not like the Wizard of Oz where the minute you cross into Kansas, you turn sepia town. Like, that's not a thing.
That's great. Oh my God, that's so funny. It's true. You know, there's so many, it's interesting. And I will say this, it's good that there's stories like yours that are coming out, obviously, to shine a light on where you're from, because I think that especially the times that we are living, and I don't mean to be political in any respect, but I think the more and more people understand the various diversity of the people that live throughout this wonderful country that we live in, the United States, then we all have like a different perspective by virtue of the stories that others tell. So when we read,
and we're all people.
With all
like,
people, right? There's like a, you know, I mean, being from the East Coast my whole life, living on this side of the country, you know, it's certainly, you have a different perspective. I'm in Miami. That colors it a whole different, you know, Roomba, you know, but the bottom line,
in Miami.
But, you know, the interesting thing is even Austin, I know how wonderfully creative it is, and all the wonderful, you know, everything, like a boom of, you know, co-creating there, and all the authors that you listed. And even in the Ozarks and even in Kansas City and even anywhere, there's always those people that we benefit from knowing more about. So when we tell those stories, it kind of, okay, it's a community klepto. Obviously, the girl has some issues, but at the same time, it gets you a little peek into, you know, the place. And I know when writing, you know, one of the things that was really paramount for me when I was starting to write in general was place as a character. So that's important that you do it justice, as well as the other characters that you speak about. So let me ask you this into this book, and which was your favorite character experience in writing this last one?
My favorite character experience was just writing about all my favorite group classes at the gym, even the ones where I have performed like I felt I might die and thought that I would get run over by the person beside me, just because you don't really get to talk about those things with other people. But especially the scene, and I won't, you know, there's no spoilers here. We already said she's in the gym, she's stealing shit from people. Like, that's the story. But she's trying to deal with her kleptomania, trying to put herself out there because she's a bit of a sociopath, and she finds catharsis in this kickboxing class. And I still go to kickboxing once a week on Monday mornings after I've been home with my kids all weekend and been working all week. Like, that's my release. And more than once, I have just, like, been punching and bawling in that class for no reason. Like, just hook, sob, hook, sob, uppercut, sob. Like,
yeah.
So writing about that, and when I brought it to my critique group, they're all like, this is great. She's finally experiencing this release, and we really feel it. And I'm like, yeah, that's totally fictional.
I can tell you there are many times that I show up in my spinning class and the tears, and it's just the release. And I love that I love that that is something that you're bringing out to this particular conversation, because even though she might be a sociopath, there's a lot of humanity, and certainly, you know, obviously the extremes. That's how we get you, right? That's how like authors, they get you. Nobody wants to go through, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. They want boom emotion, boom, you know, oh my God, horror, what the heck is she, you know, and that's something that you definitely capture in this read. So I love that that is what you brought to the fore here to talk about. You know, I like to say a lot of what authors who are already published, like 3 takeaways that you might, you know, offer to someone who's watching this and perhaps wanting to publish themselves. What are 3 wonderful or not so wonderful takeaways that you can bring out for us?
Yeah, so in your last episode with Melissa Caro, one of the things she said just really, like, it resonated with me, that there's no perfect or right process, and that you have to discipline yourself however you can. Like, people will try to tell you you have to write every day. You have to write first thing in the morning. You have to write at night. You have to write in a quiet environment. I live in a house with 2 7s, and we do not have quiet in my house, except for, and, you know, we're doing karate and ballet.
Wow.
And have to get, you know, we're still in 1st grade. This is the time of year that it's like, there's 2 weeks left in school. Here's 97 things that you have to do in the middle of the day. Good luck, parents. Oh, and I have a full-time job. Oh, and, you know, I do all these things. I cannot write every day. I cannot write first thing in the morning. I write 2 to 3 times a week after my kids go to bed until I basically run out of steam. And that works for me. You know, I have my good noise-canceling headphones and shut the door on their room and hope for the best. So, you know, there's no right process. Whatever works for you, do it. However you can discipline yourself, do it. If that's once a week, if that's every day, if that's once a month. Like, if you just spend 1 day a month, you know, to write the whole day, you know, that works. My goal is to do 1,000 words a week, because if you do 1,000 words a week, that's 52,000 words a year. That's basically a book. Like, write a book a year by only writing 1,000 words a week. You don't have to write every single day. And even if I could, I'm not sure my brain would let me. So that's number 1. Number 2 is do not self-edit. anytime I feel like my mom's going to read this, my husband's going to read this, my kids are going to grow up and read this one day, you know, that's when I start to self-edit, and that's when, you know, the gold kind of disappears. You can only really be good on the page when you are not self-editing. And you can always tone it down later. I definitely have toned down a lot of things with the book that I'm writing now. My critique group is like, whoa, like, you gotta back the language down a little, because my new character is also quite vulgar. So just don't, but you can always edit after. You can't bring out the gold when you're editing. You can only bring out the gold when you're doing that first draft.
I love that.
And then the last thing is that it's never, like, technology is making it easy for, like, there's never been a better time to put yourself out there. Like, technology is leveling the playing field for everybody.
Yeah.
Technology is making everything more accessible. And so don't be afraid of ChatGPT and whatever else is out there. Like, those things are tools.
Yeah.
And tools are there to help you. Tools are not there to take the place of your brain, because nothing can take the place of your brain.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm doing an audiobook now, and it's narrated by AI. It's a synthesized voice of a real person. I stutter in real life, so, you know, I am not going to sit in the studio for, it would probably take me 3 days to try to get through my own, you know, work. And I just got corrections back. It'll be coming out in audio next month. And there's platforms out there that make these things available to anybody.
Wow, that's awesome. That actually, I didn't know about that. So thank you for that. I appreciate that as well. I like that your takeaways, you know, are all across the board. They're very, the process and to the discipline, certainly. I love that. You know, it's interesting because even after it's been a year almost for you for this next one, you get a little tired. I think, imagine like, oh, what am I doing? Like the whole, okay, I can imagine, Kelly, that you're a bit drama like me. I like that. I can see it. I've slotted, I got it, right? But it's like, oh, what's the point? You know, like, oh, like learn your point. Like, what is your why? You got to figure that out before you sit down and like cry on your page. I imagine that might be something that you might align to. But the thing is, or maybe rage on the page. I like that a little bit better. Just like, you know, bring it all out, that mad woman inside, you know. But I think that the reality is that there's always going to be an audience out there for your story. You know, it's going to be, and certainly, you know, your own brand of, like I said before, humor or dark, you know, darkness or even crassness or whatever it is, there's always going to be an audience out there that you can literally inspire by virtue of you jumping into the world of technology and learning how you can play in what's available today. Because like you said, it's in our favor for the most part. So I want to congratulate you certainly about writing your story, and this one as well. And, you know, the libraries have it, and I'm sure there's book clubs out there who would want to connect with you to get your information. So where can they find you, first of all?
Well, KellyHitchcock.com is my website. I'm Kelly Hitchcock on most social media. I'm Kel Hitchcock here on Instagram. It's up there. You can see it. And yes, I do love doing book clubs, even though I'm socially awkward, as a lot of writers are. I love doing book clubs. I love discussing with people. I just love talking about stories. And that's, like, I love hearing people's stories. I love telling stories. I love writing stories. I live for stories. And half the time when I'm in book club, I just end up hearing everybody else's story. And then we finally are like, so are we going to talk about the book, or, you know?
Love it.
So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you know, one of my favorite things is about getting to know the author, and certainly, like I said before, you know, go out and grab her for a book club. We have these wonderful things called Zoom, where you can bring her right into the room if that's something that she's open to. Certainly to talk about any one of her 3 books at this point, but certainly Community Klepto. Exciting that it's coming out in audio soon. That's really amazing as well. And, you know, one of the questions I do love to ask is, what do you want to be known for, Kelly? I mean, you've done it, you put it out there, and like when someone reads you, what do you want to be known for?
Well, when someone reads me, I want to make them laugh. Like even my, more serious work, there's humor in there because I think that's how we get through this hard thing that is life and this long thing that is life, is you have to step back and laugh at situations. You have to step back and laugh at yourself. As a parent, my kids see me writing at night after they're supposed to be in bed because they get out of their rooms and are like, Mom, what are you doing? They see me working full time. They see me doing all these things. Your mom, I know, was your best friend, confidant. That was not my experience growing up. I didn't grow up with my mom. We're not super, super close. And I kind of feel like her whole life, she made herself smaller. And that was like just the thing that she did. And I basically want to do the exact opposite and just make myself bigger. Not figurative, not like actually bigger. That's why I go to the gym. But, I want my kids to see me doing all these things so that they know that I live a big life, and I want them to live a big life, and they can live a big life, because that was not an example I had as a kid. And, we talked about perseverance, like knowing that, yeah, sometimes it takes 12 years to get a book published. Sometimes it takes 30 years to write a book and publish it. However long it takes, like if that's what's in your heart, you got to do it. And that's what I want, to get across to my kids.
I want to point out that, and this is something that I've experienced because I've had the wonderful privilege of speaking to a lot of authors like yourself. It's about you more than it is about the story. And I love that you're mentioning now that you're encouraging your children or whoever's listening today to go out and live the life of your dreams, the bigger life that you came here to like grab onto and experience. Because at the end of the day, when you're shining and you're in your passion and you're in your glory, and then you are igniting your children, your 7-year-old twins, right? Or your friends or anybody who's reading your book, Community Klepto, like this in and of itself. And I have to ask you before I go, the cover, because I told them at the outset I would. So the cover, where did you get this idea?
When I sent them the book, because, you've been through the process, they ask you for input on what you would like on the cover. I had no idea. They told me that they changed something like 70% of titles. They did not change mine, and they never suggested changing it because it's the perfect title. Like, why would you ever change Community Klepto? So I gave them like a picture of the community center where it took place. I described the story, and I was like, I have no idea what they're going to come up with. But they nailed it. Like, this is fantastic. I absolutely love it. And it's simple, but you can shrink it down to a teeny tiny tile and know that this is the book.
Yeah, for sure. And then, of course, I'm going to ask you, your tiara is very unique and different. So tell me a little bit about that. And I found this. I have my little Esmeralda hat on, so I am.
So I'm huge. I love playing dress up, like even as a grown up. I love Halloween. I love costumes. Any excuse I have. This is from my Black Swan costume.
Okay.
But it's just like the most fabulous tiara. And I wore it a couple weeks ago. My kids wanted a costume party for their birthday, and I'm like, you are my kid. I know you're my kid because you want a costume party for your 7th birthday party. And it was actually very hard to find costume party things that didn't have to do with Halloween. I'm like, it's April. We're not doing Halloween. But I wore this again to be a queen bee for their birthday.
That's awesome. And definitely you are the queen bee, and I've really enjoyed talking to you, especially about your book. Give us something. Oh, look, it's even upside down. So there we go.
Backward and upside down.
There you go, upside down. I love it. On the back too. So send us away with some inspiration today. I know that you said when you're like, you don't read a ton of inspiration, but you are a huge inspiration. So send us away with some inspiration today.
God, you're putting me on the spot.
I am.
I loved what you said yesterday about how instead of looking for the light at the tunnel, you just lit that bitch up yourself.
Right. That's right.
You don't have to do things according to everybody's rules. Just light that bitch up.
That's right. So I would say, before you do that, go buy Community Klepto and get some inspiration from this wonderful humoristic approach to going to the gym, certainly, and learning all about her main character, and get to know Kelly as well. Like she said, she's on Instagram at Kel Hitchcock. So that's one way you can find her. And I know that you're on Facebook too as well, correct?
Yes.
And it's
Kelly Hitchcock.
Okay, Kelly Hitchcock. So go and do that and you'll thank me. She's definitely a joy to talk to, obviously. And it's been really quite amazing. So I love the bigger story. Go be your story. Go be bigger than you can ever imagine. And with that, I want to thank you once again, Kelly, for coming on today on Amazing Authors, episode 26. It has been wonderful. I do once again encourage everyone to go out and buy her book, go grab it at the libraries or request it at the libraries. And, you know, at that point, we can't wait to see what other characters you're coming up with. And I'm certain Queen Bee is going to have a lot of fun to share with all of us. So without further ado, thank you so much, Kelly, today. I really appreciate you joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Have a great day, everybody.